Most directors think that liquidation is basically you sign a few forms, close a company down, and it's done in a matter of weeks. It's not. A liquidation is one of the most heavily regulated processes in UK business law, and the cost to do it is about to double. So if you're considering liquidation, you need to understand exactly what's happening because it's about to get a lot more expensive. And if you're one of those directors who've already been quoted less than say £5 to liquidate a company, this video should make you run a mile because no company in the UK can afford to do liquidations for cheap unless they're going to come back to you once they've been appointed to take more fees off you down the line that you never knew about. Now, right now in many liquidations, the IP, the insolvency practitioner, they do a mountain of work and then they face a problem that nobody really knows about. They're struggling to get their fees approved by your creditors. Now, the new proposal, it's from R3, it's designed to fix this problem of getting their fees approved by creating a baseline fee for all the essential work that you get in a standard liquidation. Now, R3 are a governing body, just so you know. They're the people that sort of suggest the new rules, they oversee the insolvency professional. Now, in this video, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you what an insolvency practitioner actually does before liquidation, because there's a lot of work to be done before they take an appointment, during liquidation, and after they've been appointed, okay? Now, the first thing that I want to talk to you about is why liquidations get delayed and why a lot of the time it's not your fault, the director. I get this all the time. Directors ring me 12 months after liquidation going, Chris, it's still saying in liquidation on company's house, when will it move from liquidation to dissolved, okay? And most importantly, I'm going to cover in this video what the money you spend with an insolvency practitioner pays for, right? A liquidation is not a form filling service. Some people say to me, it's like, Chris, £5 for liquidation, that sounds expensive. And I always say, well, expensive compared to what? Anyway, listen, let's dive in. First of all, let's talk about this £10,000 proposal. What is it and why does it matter to you, a UK director? So R3 have prepared a proposal and it's gone to the insolvency service. And the proposal is to change the insolvency rules around liquidators' fees, okay? And the headline is pretty simple. A minimum fee is going to be set, if this gets passed, at £10,000 plus VAT. So that's 12 grand for a standard liquidation. And that fee is intended to cover the essential work that needs to be done in every insolvency, okay? Now, just so you're aware, this is going out, I think, in January 2026. It's a proposal. It is not law today. But if it's adopted, it's basically going to mean the cost of a standard liquidation for many of you is going to double, okay? And there's a reason why R3 are pushing it. That their argument is when an insolvency practitioner has to do more work, they need to go to the creditors of your company to get their fees approved, okay? And basically, creditors don't respond. And what it does, it makes fee approval slow and expensive, okay? And when IPs have to go to court just to get their fees approved, basically what R3 are saying, that's money and time not well spent. And let's say there's a pot of money in the insolvency practitioner's bank account, that really should be going back to creditors. But all this delay on time depletes that money in the bank and less, in fact, in lots of cases, nothing goes back to creditors. So the point isn't IPs want to charge more for the fun of it. The point is the system that they've got currently makes it really hard for the insolvency practitioner to get paid for work that the insolvency service, basically the law, requires them to do, okay? Now, a lot of people think insolvency is black magic. They have no idea what an insolvency practitioner does. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break down now what an insolvency practitioner must do. And they're going to start with what they must do before liquidation even takes place. Because most people think, well, liquidation begins when the insolvency practitioner gets appointed at the creditors meeting. And it doesn't. You know, there's a lot of work that's done even before that point. And it's things like basic stuff, you know, confirming insolvency. Because before you can go into liquidation, the insolvency practitioner has got to be comfortable the company's insolvent. And that needs to be evidenced with things like, you know, cash flow. Can you demonstrate that you can't pay your debts when they fall due? A balance sheet position. So that basically shows all your liabilities and all your assets. They need to look at things like, is there any creditor pressure? Is there any legal action that's been taken against the company? You know, is a CCJ been served? Now, this isn't just casual on a phone call. It has to be documented, because if a process goes wrong, it can trigger bigger problems later for the director and for the insolvency practitioner. Remember, you can only put a business into liquidation that is insolvent, i.e. can't pay its debts when they fall due, liabilities are more than the assets. And then you've got to do all the anti-money laundering checks. They've got to do things called sanction checks. IPs are regulated, and that means that every director needs to be onboarded properly. So they've got to identify each director, they've got to verify each director. And that might mean jumping on a Google Meet or a Zoom so they can clap eyes on you. They've got to look for things like conflict checks, you know, do they know you in a certain capacity? Have they done jobs for you in the past? And they've got to risk assess the case. Because once they take that appointment, okay, they need to check that it's not a fraudulent appointment. You know, if you're somebody who has used an insolvency practitioner 3 or 4 times, that insolvency practitioner is going to have a problem with that. Now, when they're going, well, the governing body will have a problem with the insolvency practitioner who's working for you. Now, when they're going through all these checks, if something crops up, they can't just carry on, you know, anyway. They've got to stop and go, listen, I can't do this. And if they can't take the appointment, they've done all that work and they've not been paid for it. Another thing that they've got to do before they take an appointment, and again, our team help with this, is basically gathering all the company records. So they've got to produce some documents and reports, but when they're getting in all these records from you, they're there to try and spot risks. The insolvency practitioner needs a pretty serious record pack, and it will include things like accounts, management information, you know, bank statements, records for VAT, PAYE, corporation tax, a creditor list. Who is it you owe money? How much do you owe them? An asset list, are there finance agreements? What leases does the company have? Payroll, employee data. And this is what a lot of you won't realise, that if there are records missing, and it happens from time to time, the insolvency practitioner's still got to produce reports and they've got to meet deadlines, which means more chasing, more time on the phone, more time spent on your job, which eventually means more cost. Now, once you've got all that information, they draft something called a statement of affairs. And this, if you will, is like a core legal snapshot that's going out to creditors, okay? And it will outline what assets there are. Are there any estimated realisations? You know, is there plant and machinery? Do you owe an overdrawn director's loan? How much of all of this do they believe that will come into the estate? They've got to split the creditors up between who's a secure creditor, so who's got a debenture against the company, who's a preferential creditor, you know, HMRC, who is unsecured, and what the expected outcomes are for those creditors. Now, what you, by the way, have got to sign that statement of affairs under something called a statement of truth. And if it's wrong, okay, it can trigger questions and investigations later on. So it's got to be done properly, because if it's done wrong, it can cause you problem as a director, but guess what? It can cause the insolvency practitioner down the line a problem. Now, once all this is done, they're going to prepare pre-appointment paperwork, right? They're things like board minutes, resolutions, notices, engagement letters, appointment documents, and they've all got to be aligned with the rules and obviously the time frames. And only when all this is done can actual liquidation begin clearly. Now think about it. I've been rattling on for a few minutes. Then the insolvency practitioner at the moment isn't even in a position to take a penny off you. They can't bill anything from you up until this point. And they've not even taken the appointment yet. So they've done all that work, okay, in the hope that they do get they do get appointed. Now, the creditors meeting, okay, so remember, if you call us at Director First, we're going to get all this information off you. You'll have a phone call with one of the insolvency practitioners, sort of go through what the strategy is. And then you're going to be asked to sign a raft of paperwork, all those things I've just talked to you about, resolution, board minutes, notices, engagement letters. You're going to send them back. The insolvency practitioner is going to send all the correspondence out to your creditors, and they're going to set something called a creditors meeting, okay? Now, at the creditors meeting, the insolvency practitioner gets appointed. And most directors think this is the end. And actually, it's the start of the insolvency practitioner's job. So I'll just go through those bits again. Your shareholder resolution and appointment docs are signed, okay? The company enters into liquidation through shareholder approval. Remember, 75% of shareholders have got to approve the resolution to go into liquidation. Then the insolvency practitioner is going to notify all the creditors properly and on time via the mail, okay? Creditors need to get the right information in the right format with the right deadlines, and then there is a notice of liquidation. There's going to be a statement of affairs sent to creditors. So remember, that's the snapshot of what you owe, how much they're likely to get back, if anything. And they're also going to be given information of how to vote. Remember, your creditors, if you're going into liquidation, if you imagine this, every single creditor has a vote on who the liquidator is, right? So easy reckoning, let's say it's £100,000 that you owe, and there's 100,000, every pound is a vote, okay? So let's say HMRC are owed 50,000. HMRC, well, they just don't vote. As long as you're using a licensed insolvency practitioner, they don't get involved. But then you might have IWOCA who are owed £20,000, and you might have suppliers that are owed £15,000, and you might owe some gas and electric and bounce back loan and what have you. Now, out of all of those creditors, they can all vote to who the insolvency practitioner is, okay? So you've got to remember, you've got to bear that in mind as well. You know, some of your creditors might not be happy with the insolvency practitioner that you have chosen, and they will try and vote for their own insolvency practitioner. And guess what? If they do, and the other insolvency practitioner takes that appointment, all of this work that the insolvency practitioner has done up to this point, they might not be paid for it. Now, at the creditors meeting, they're going to take control of the company. Let's call this the appointment, right? At the appointment, the liquidator becomes the legal controller of things like bank accounts, assets of the business, contracts of the business. They're going to be the person responsible for claims from employees, claims from creditors. It's their job to try and make any recoveries. Now, a director's powers from this point, from the creditors meeting, they cease. But it doesn't mean that you've got nothing to do. You're still going to need to comply with the insolvency practitioner. Now, once they've been appointed the insolvency practitioner, what they've got to do is they've got to secure company assets and protect them, okay? And depending on the case, this can mean, you know, many things. I mean, your bank account will get frozen, okay? When you sign your liquidation notices, the bank get informed, the bank will freeze the account so you can't whip all the money out. But the insolvency practitioner might need to secure the premises. They might need to put things in place so assets don't go missing. They might need to, well, it's highly likely that they'll need to appoint agents and valuers to actually come in and give an opinion on what the assets and business might be worth. They might have to arrange insurance for buildings in the business. That insolvency practitioner's job is to protect creditor value, okay? Now, you can be the most honest and cooperative director there is, but that insolvency practitioner, that is their role. That's where their neck is on the line. So they've got to follow this to the letter. Moving on, They've got to do all like the filings, statutory filings and notifications. So who do they need to speak to? Companies House, HMRC. They need to send a report into the Insolvency Service, London Gazette or Edinburgh Gazette. They need to deal with the pensions. All of these have got rules, deadlines and record keeping requirements. Nothing can be forgotten. And if they do forget to do things, they're at risk of losing their license, which is losing their livelihood. Now, once you're in liquidation, right, this is when the IP's job really, really starts. And this is where the real time goes. And it can be weeks and months. They've got to investigate your conduct as a director. So that liquidator is going to review and report on things like, why has this company failed? Have there been any transactions before insolvency? You know, basically, have you nicked assets out of the business and not paid a fair value for them? Now, remember, you can move assets out of your business before you liquidate the company, but you've got to make sure that whoever's buying them, including you, is paying a fair market value for them. They're going to investigate directors' loan accounts. What does that mean? Well, they're going to go through all your bank statements and they're going to start asking questions about big payments here, big payments there. They're going to see if you've made any preference payments, which is basically you become insolvent and you've started to shift, prefer one creditor to another. They're going to look for things like wrongful trade-ins. They're definitely looking at your bounce back loans. Even though that was a long time ago, they're looking at, should you have took a bounce back loan? Did you take the right amount? What did you spend the bounce back loan on? And once they've looked at all that, they're going to submit a conduct report to the Insolvency Service. And the Insolvency Service will decide whether or not to take further action against you as a director. Another job, they've got to realise the assets of the business and try and recover some money. Remember, that's going to involve agents cost, proper marketing and a sales process. It might be to auction some stuff off. They've got to chase money that's owed into your company, chasing debtors to get paid. And if you think about it, if you're struggling to get paid, these guys might find it even harder. Now, another thing they're going to have to deal with leases. They're going to have to deal with contract terminations, HP agreements, sending vehicles back, sending machinery back. And if they're selling any assets, they have got to be absolutely sure that they're selling them for the best value. It's got to be defensible. Everything an insolvency practitioner does can and will be scrutinised because creditors can challenge it. Then let's talk about employee claims. So that is all the statutory forms and the claims around employees. And that your employees, remember, if they've been there over 2 years, they're going to claim redundancy. They're going to claim arrears of pay. Okay, so if they've not been paid certain wages, they'll be able to claim it. The insolvency practitioners will oversee that. They'll be able to claim holiday pay that's accrued and not taken. And they'll also be able to claim notice pay. Excuse me, I need to spit my teeth out today. And that insolvency practitioner has got to guide that process and submit the right paperwork at the right time so your staff can get what they're entitled to. And then your creditors, what they're going to do is they're going to send in proof of debt forms. They submit claims, and then they'll submit claims, they'll submit disputes, and then the insolvency practitioners have got to put all these in their right rankings. A liquidator's got to verify each claim. They'll have to handle disputes and evidence requests. If a creditor asks for something, the insolvency practitioner's got to respond. And then once all of that done, they've got to prepare distributions if there's any money left. Now we're getting towards the end of their job. They've got to do something called final reporting. Once everything is dealt with, there's final receipts and payments, a final report that will go in at Companies House, closure filings, dissolution steps. And that's when this company's actually finished. So if you think about it, at the moment, you're getting all of that for £5,000 on a bog standard wrap-up. But there's talk that it's going to double to 10 grand plus VAT. Now, you might hear that and go, £10,000 plus VAT. You think that an insolvency practitioner's pocketing 10 grand for a few emails. That is not how this works. Most of the cost is time, staff, compliance. Now, the government have researched liquidations, and they've basically put out a report there that says most insolvency practitioners, certainly on these smaller jobs, they're losing money, okay? They're not getting enough money for the work that they are doing. Now, I'm going to wrap up. What does an IP actually do? They verify insolvency, complete AML checks, rebuild records, draft all the statutory documents, run the appointment process, set a creditors meeting, take control, secure assets, file notices. They're going to investigate your conduct. They're going to handle employee claims. They're going to adjudicate creditor claims. They're going to distribute funds if possible, and then they're going to close the company. And why might costs jump from what I believe at the moment is about £5 plus VAT to 10 grand in the future? It's because one of their governing bodies has proposed a statutory baseline fee for standard liquidations. And the idea is to stop cases getting stuck, stop costly court applications, and make sure all the legally required work is actually paid for. So if you're a UK director facing insolvency and you want some good, honest advice, and you don't want to be hit with an increase in cost, I think now would be a good time to speak to somebody. Listen, my name is Chris Worden. I'm from Director First. If you want to find out more about things you should be doing before you put the business into insolvency, I want you to go there, watch that video with all the top key things that you should be doing before you liquidate your business. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.